All right, let's get reaction to the tariff increase. Joining us now is Head of Wits University School of Economic and Business Sciences, Professor Yanni Rousseau. Thanks so much for your time, sir.
Good afternoon.
Appreciate it. So let's talk about people first and how this is going to affect them.
Naturally, this is an increase in cost for people buying electricity, so people will be affected by this, and people will have to look at their spending patterns to see how they can make ends meet with more expensive electricity.
The snowball effect, though, of this on businesses as well, it could lead to a price increase in food and other goods services in the future, do you think?
It could lead to further price increases, but at the same time, we must remember that a large part of this increase is accounted for by inflation. So Eskom faces inflation pressures, like all of us do, and therefore, at the least, need to be compensated for inflationary increases in its tariffs.
So 13.8% combined for this financial year, 9.4% and then 4.4% as well. Let's talk about whether or not this is actually going to help Eskom with its debt. That debt that it says it really can't get rid of.
Well, we hope it will help Eskom, but at the same time, Eskom will have to look at its cost structures. It will have to see whether it has the right number of staff members, whether the staff members are remunerated at the correct level. At the same time, Eskom should stop paying all bonuses. There is no longer any justification ever for any bonus payments at Eskom. Eskom should at the same time also lead by example and press charges against previous executives that were part of state capture. We've not seen Eskom taking any steps against previous corrupt management. And Eskom will not win the hearts and minds of South Africans and get South Africans on their side if they don't lead by example against people who mismanaged Eskom before.
Now, we know that Eskom is one of the driving mechanisms of our economy because it keeps us lit, it keeps the electricity going. What is going to be the impact of an increase like this when you look at the markets, especially the rand? Any reaction there at all?
Well, at this point in time, the market will have to assess whether or not Eskom will be able to keep the lights on with this increase. Eskom must avoid load shedding at any cost because load shedding is very disruptive to the South African economy. So the market's assessment will be to see whether this is a sufficient increase to allow Eskom to keep the lights on. We must get rid of load shedding, and at the same time, it's important for Eskom to make sure that it is a reliable power supplier, hence not to force more people off the power supply grid through other means of power generation, for instance, own installations, etc.
Now, Eskom asked for 15% for a 3-year period. It got 13.8% if you combine for the next financial year, but lower increases for the next 2 years. And this, of course, it would argue, is not good enough to sustain the power utility going forward. What does it do?
Yes, Eskom will probably come back next year to Nersa and make a case why the increase Nersa already announced for next year will be insufficient. It will be necessary to assess Eskom's financial position and see whether or not the increase is sufficient. But at the same time, Eskom will have to show what efforts, if any, it made to reduce its own internal cost structures. And at the same time, I have to make the point, with this tariff increase, Eskom has a very big vested interest in lower inflation. Because the lower the inflation rate with this increase, the higher the real tariff increase that will flow through to Eskom.
Yeah. Okay, I want to move on and talk about President Cyril Ramaphosa's comments in Parliament today about the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. Let's take a listen to what he said and then we'll unpack it in a moment.
The issue of the Reserve Bank, the governing party has taken a very clear resolution. A clear resolution that says the Reserve Bank of our country should be owned by the people of South Africa. That is an important consideration. Now, what do we have? We have a situation where we've got external shareholders who live in various countries in the world and so forth. Now, so that you must never think that the ANC is smoking something. This has been done by a number of countries in the world. There are some 6 countries only in the world that are still having external shareholding in their central banks. South Africa is one of them.
So, of course, the markets are almost immediately reacting to what the President said in Parliament. The rand is really struggling at the moment, just around 14.41 the last time I checked. This is something that's not going to make many quarters happy.
South Africa is unfortunately very good at scoring own goals. There's a lot of sensitivity around the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank is one of the institutions that had not been captured through the state capture project of President Zuma. And the monetary policy operational independence of the Reserve Bank is very important in keeping inflation under control. So the interpretation of the statement of Mr. Ramaphosa is that the government will try and get control of monetary policy, will try and force an easy money policy that will lead to higher inflation in the country. But Mr. Ramaphosa is right in saying that the Reserve Bank is an outlier with private shareholders. However, the true intentions of the ANC in nationalising the Reserve Bank has never been explained. And a throwaway sentence in Parliament by President Ramaphosa to say it must be owned by the people really means nothing. So the true intentions of the nationalisation must be understood, must be conveyed clearly.
Yeah. So what are the implications of a statement like this when it comes to ratings agencies and the ratings, the credit ratings that they actually have for South Africa going forward?
A statement like this is all over negative. And this clearly stands in the light of a general election on May the 8th. So it's an unfortunate statement at this point in time where we are trying to restore investor confidence in the country. We'll have to see how this plays out. It will, of course, lead to a very big debate around the valuation of the shares of the Reserve Bank, which will probably lead to a number of court cases. So it will lead to a dragged-out process that will not be in South Africa's interest at this point in time.
Thank you so much for your time and your insight. I appreciate it. That was Wits University School of Economic and Business Sciences Professor Jannie Rousseau.